Do you know what your HOMA-IR is? Probably not, because most doctors still don't include it in the standard blood work. But your HOMA-IR is a great indicator of your metabolic health. In other words, are you insulin sensitive or are you insulin resistant? And like fasting insulin, it can be a great early indicator of some level of insulin resistance and metabolic disease brewing under the surface long before your blood sugar comes out of normal ranges. Now, if your doctor is relying solely on your fasted glucose, your A1C, to determine whether or not you have a blood sugar condition or some level of insulin resistance, well, he's going to be a little late to the party, which means you're going to be late to the party too when it comes to turning that condition around and trying to make some changes. However, if you had been looking at your fasting insulin or your HOMA-IR, you could have seen some level of metabolic disease or insulin resistance brewing under the surface as much as 10 or even 15 years before your fasting glucose comes out of normal ranges. And the ranges for your HOMA-IR are very simple to understand. Basically, if it's over 2, you have insulin resistance. If it's under 2, you're insulin sensitive. If it's 1 or less, well, you're a metabolic rock star. Your HOMA-IR is calculated using both your fasting insulin and your fasted blood glucose. And with this combination, even if your blood glucose remains the same or stable, but your insulin levels are going up in the background in an effort to keep those blood glucose levels stable, well, you're going to get an early indicator of it long before your blood sugar starts going out of range. I'll give you some examples. Let's say your fasting insulin is at 5 and your blood glucose is at 85 milligrams per deciliter. Both great scores. Your HOMA-IR is going to be 1.05. Remember I said anything below 2 is insulin sensitive, below 1 is rockstar material. So that's a great place to be. But if your fasting insulin is at 9 and your blood glucose is at 85 milligrams per deciliter, same level, your HOMA-IR is going to be 1.9. 1.9, right up there next to 2, you're borderline, right? Goes a little higher, you're going to be in that insulin resistant range. So it's a good indication that, hey, it might be time to pay attention to what you're eating, your workouts, maybe your sleep, but do something to start pulling that fasting insulin level back down into the lower single digits. Now, if your fasting insulin is at 12 and you have the same blood glucose at 85 milligrams per deciliter, well, that puts you at 2.5. Now let's think about this. We have the same blood sugar in each of these calculations. A good blood sugar, 85 milligrams per deciliter, your doctor would say, hey, fantastic, great work. You're doing great. There's nothing wrong. No problem. But if you see the HOMA-IR and it's at 2.5 and we know that anything above 2 is insulin resistant, well, here we have some indication that, hey, there's some insulin resistance going on here, but it's early and you can start doing something about it now before your blood sugar starts rising. How valuable would that be? Now, if you didn't see my last video on insulin resistance and fasting insulin levels, you want to go back and look at that. I'll give you some indication of where you want your fasting insulin to be, so be sure to check out that video. And if you don't have HOMA-IR, but you have a fasting insulin and your fasted blood glucose on your blood work, let me tell you how you can calculate it yourself. So if you're using milligrams per deciliter, as I did in the example, then you multiply your fasting insulin times your fasted glucose and divide it by 405. And that'll give you your HOMA-IR. Now, if you're outside the US and your blood sugar is in millimoles per liter, then you just use a different divisor. So you multiply your fasting insulin by your blood glucose in the millimoles and divide by 22.5. And that'll give you the same HOMA-IR score. So I have to encourage you. Your doc still may not include this on your blood work, but you can. Now that you know about it, put it to work because you don't want this to sneak up on you. You don't want to find out that you've got insulin resistance brewing or already established because you found out your blood glucose is out of range when you could have found out 5 or 10 years before simply by tracking your fasting insulin or your HOMA-IR. So you know what? You know now, you're responsible. Get on it. Tell your doctor you want to include your fasting insulin in your HOMA-IR and your blood work. If he won't do it, there's plenty of walk-in blood work places where they will do it for you. I strongly encourage you, get eyes on your insulin. It will be the best investment in your metabolic health.